One of the big cats in the handheld gaming industry. Today on tonight. Well, today, this week, however you prefer to listen, we we're talking about a
Mad Cats
handheld classic.
controllers.
Yeah,
Ugh.
Tiger Electronics,
Yes.
Anyway, tonight I am joined by the incomparable GP. How
You
you doing,
mispronounced
Justin?
incompetent. Thank you.
Jeez.
Sick Jake
That's me.
and Sinistar 77.
Hi.
How you doing tonight, guys?
Fantastic.
Always good for a Friday.
Okay.
Right on. Okay. So I was purposely misleading, but anybody who saw the thumbnail knows better. We're talking about the Atari Lynx, which is really more of a medium cat, but I mean, who says medium cat?
It's big compared to the small cats.
Is it bigger than a bread box?
I mean, depends on how big the bread box is, but maybe. Have you seen the size of this thing?
Was the bread box bigger than a Lynx?
I don't know.
I would say the
bread
Lynx
boxes
one.
anymore.
Are we talking the
still a
hardware or the
thing?
cat anymore?
Hold
Oh
on.
my god.
What's the timestamp here? I want to know when we first went off the rails. I feel like
30
this could have been a record. By a bread box? Okay.
47 seconds.
Nice.
Press speed of bread. Let's go.
Press B to
GG.
tangent.
So many
All
things
right,
to say
so-
today.
I don't know. Did you guys ever get to play with an Atari Lynx back in the 90s?
No, but I really wanted one. I was a Game Boy kid and I liked my Game Boy, don't get me wrong. But I used to see magazine ads for the Lynx. And you see that like super like large screenshot of Batman. I'm like, I want the Lynx. It's color, it looks really cool. But I never had a chance to touch one or play in one. So this is pretty exciting for me.
My old age brain has fuzzy recollections because, I would go to the local game store and they would have the, strapped to the wall, each of the, and I kind of think there would have been a Lynx, but I don't know. Probably not.
I don't recall ever seeing one set up for demos at
Hmm.
any of the stores I went to. But that would have been like Toys R Us, Target, maybe Software, etc. Stuff like that.
Okay. I never got to play this with one as a kid. But I do remember very vividly. It was would have been early August of 2022 that I found out about the Atari Lynx, and I have been obsessed ever since.
Tell me you're serious. Did you actually not know of the Atari Lynx before this week?
I think I knew of it. I think it existed, but I didn't realize where in the sacred timeline that existed or any of the things really surrounding it. So I really didn't ever start to deep dive into it until very, very recently. But man, so much to say, so much to go through. I will reel it in. And I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you, but go ahead.
It was super
no,
early,
no.
right? It came out like
It
89?
did.
Yeah.
So
89?
it came out, it released 2 months after the Game Boy.
was that early? Oh wow.
2 months
Okay.
after the Game Boy. It's kind of odd how it didn't do better given the hardware specifications between the two as a comparison. Like
But
Game
is
Boy
it-
and Lynx, when you
is
look at what's up?
I was going to say, is it really that odd though? Because Nintendo was Nintendo, right? And if it's 2 months later, anyway.
Yeah.
I suppose. But I mean it's so let's look at it this way. The Game Boy arrived in North America in July of 89.
Mhm.
In September we got the Lynx. So
That's
it was not a long wait.
Can you break down the hardware, the difference between the two? I mean, obviously Lynx is color. Is the resolution
It's-
better on the Lynx or was it less?
It's a lower resolution. Oh my gosh, what was it? I think it's It's like the
160 by
same.
102. I know that much.
Yes.
That I was playing with
Yes,
earlier.
and the Game Boy and Game Gear are 160 by 144. So
Oh,
Yes.
it's shorter vertically and the same width.
okay.
Well, let,
So
let,
it kind of had the widescreen perspective going on in a handheld form back then
Right.
too. I mean, I'm sure it was, make it a little easier on the hardware, but still.
no, like, okay. I'm so floored by how impressive this is, and I have to ask you guys this just to start. Given the fact that Game Boy outperformed the Lynx 4,800 to 1, whatever it is, which was the bigger thing working against the Lynx? The fact that it was Atari and not Nintendo, or the fact that it came out 2 months later? Because I think the only thing that hindered the sale of this system was the fact that it was the Atari branded thing. Because everything that I see here is like, this is mid 90s, like a 96 sort of handheld.
Atari still probably had the moniker of bringing down the game industry as well.
Right, from earlier in
Yeah,
the 80s, yeah.
that is entirely possible. There's also the fact that this thing was a bigger power drain than the Game Boy. The Game Boy had what, like 10 to 12 hours of battery life on 4 AA's?
Approximately 15 hours
Yeah.
of gameplay,
Approximately
according
15.
to
Okay.
yeah.
So the Lynx 1, and both models took 6 AA's. And I'm gonna talk about this a little more in a second because I think it's funny. The Lynx 1 lasted 4 to 5 hours. The Lynx 2 lasted 5 to 6.
Mm.
That's better than Nintendo Switch. Like in today's age.
This is true.
And the Game
This
Gear,
is
right?
true.
I mean,
Yeah, Game Gear was
But
also
back
worse.
in the day, there was also the aspect of, fewer batteries, longer lifespan for the kid playing video games that don't really matter. Just throw him in the back seat, let him shut up for a road trip,
It was 4
And
batteries for the Game Boy, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Originally,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
but I
the Game
mean,
Boy Color and I think the Game Boy Color was 2 AA's, or not the Color. Yeah, the Color
The
was 2
Pocket, I think.
AA's.
The Pocket and the
The
Color were
Pocket
2.
was 2 AAA's, I think.
Okay.
Wow.
And I mean, the battery life on those things by the end of the Game Boy's run was absolutely fantastic. And I don't think the Lynx would have ever come close.
Right, but then the hardware is also different. Like the Game Boy it's not even 8-bit, right? Meanwhile, the Lynx had
N-
a 16-bit processor in it, I think.
Yes.
Mm,
It
16-bit
had,
video
color.
processor.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, it had, I think it had, yeah, it had the 16-bit video processor, an 8-bit CPU core.
I actually
Okay.
looked this piece up because I was interested in because mobile back in the day, like obviously we're talking like early chips, and it is a revised version of the same chip that was in the Apple II and the Commodore 64 in a handheld. So it was an 8-bit 6502 that was a 65SC02, which is just a modified version.
Versus the Game Boy. Right.
Yeah, and the Game
Yeah,
Boy
four-
was kind
Four
of its own
Shades of
thing.
Gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or spinach and mustard, as I like to call it.
Oh,
The original
yes.
colors.
Well,
That's
and
the
the
original.
Atari, okay. Can you do ambidextrous stuff on the Game Boy? No.
I mean, you can
Can
cross
you
your
play it
hands.
horizontally?
Yeah,
No.
you can cross your arms in the arcades. You ever see those people do that?
No.
No? I see people do it all the time in the arcades. Cross your hands over. You
My
can do that.
Yeah, my cousin used to do that because he had a Master System arcade joystick kind of thing. It was literally just the joystick and 2 buttons on the controller. But for some reason, the joystick was on the right and the buttons were on the left. So he would play cross-handed all the time because he's right-handed. But that is one of the really cool. The Atari Lynx did a lot of cool stuff design-wise. It had options galore in terms of like most games had an option to turn on or off the music
Mhm.
and still leave
noticed
the
that.
sound effects on so that it
Yeah.
wasn't, I guess, so you could hear the sound effects more clearly, or so that your game isn't more obnoxious in certain areas where you don't want it to be, whatever. I don't know. But I always thought that was kind of a neat idea. On top of that, yes, you look at it and you're like, why does it have 2 buttons on the top and 2 buttons on the bottom on the right-hand side and the D-pad on the left? Well, that's because it was designed to be able to play left-handed. So you could flip it upside down and play with the
Oh.
D-pad on the right and the button's on the left. There was an option
Yep.
button to flip the screen around either
Mhm.
way.
Okay.
And then some games didn't even play horizontally; they played vertically,
Mhm.
Tate
like their
mode.
arcade counterparts would.
Yep.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Called Tate mode. I can't remember who it's
Yeah.
named after as a Japanese developer. I guess and he called it Tate mode for all the shooters and stuff.
Ah.
Mm.
So in that case, you would generally hold the D-pad on the bottom and the
Vertically,
buttons up
yeah.
top. So you'd hold it like a friggin' like an infant or something, basically. Support the head.
Well, I got to tell, I'm going to blow everybody's mind here, and this is not really something. Okay, if anybody is listening and knows how to do, go back and rewrite a game for an old system, which I know everybody does. I can't talk tonight. I'm sorry. All I'm saying is I want Metal Storm for the Atari Lynx for no other reason than you can mid-game turn the shits upside down as you go to the ceiling and just keep playing that way. Tell me that would not be a dope mechanic.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
Mm,
I'm
yeah.
saying
You
now,
say
of course,
that.
Metal Storm didn't come out till later, but we can. I
I
understand retro is dead.
We
but
can dream. We can dream.
Retro is dead.
one can
I-
dream.
Says one chart.
I will have a
Yeah.
reason why that might not be a great idea.
Okay.
Now, for all the great ports that the Lynx had, because this console was great for arcade ports. It had Stun Runner, which I don't know if you guys ever played at the arcade,
Mhm.
but
Never heard that one.
Stun Runner was like a big
Yeah.
sit-in machine where you'd use a steering wheel and you'd run, and the game ran in 3D at the arcades. It was one of the earlier 3D
Right.
games for arcade machines. And you'd like slide up the tube on the right or the left, and
Yep.
it felt very F-Zero, well before F-Zero.
Yes.
Except it wasn't a race against other players. It was a race against the clock and trying to navigate the course without hitting too many obstructions.
Right.
Yeah, it was the Sonic 2 bonus level.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But for the Lynx, I had this on the Lynx, and it's a pretty good representation. I tried the arcade version the other day, and I was like, man, this is basically the same game. Obviously, it was sprites on the Lynx. At least I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure it was. But it represented the game really well. Much better than hard driving for the SNES or Genesis. That's for sure.
What's wrong with hard
um,
driving? Everybody loves hard driving.
If you play it at the arcade, it's not bad. But if you play it on a home console, it's an absolute
it's-
piece of shit.
It's trash. Yeah.
If we're talking arcade ports, can I bring up something that I found? Because I played through a bunch of these titles in preparation for this. I didn't look up much on the system, but I played through a bunch of the titles. And Miss Pac-Man, fantastic
great.
port.
I have
Yeah.
not played that one.
Fantastic port.
I had
like-
to play that. I had not played that.
Yeah, I
It
think of
fit
the
all on the same
2600
screen.
Pac-Man.
Yeah.
It did.
Oh,
It did. And you could see all of the ghosts at the same time.
This is
What
true.
noise did she make? Was it like a bonk noise?
Yes, it was a bonk, bonk.
Like
No,
the other
it was-
Atari ports, yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it was a great port.
Yeah, it's a fantastic port, and the sprites are really tiny, but it works, and it's a really
Mhm.
great version of Pac-Man. I really like playing that one. Actually, it's good.
Yeah, my uncle had Rampart.
Mm.
Which I don't remember
One of
the
my
name
favorite games,
Super-
Rampart.
It's a
I
cool
love
NES
that
title,
game.
yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, he had it on the Lynx, and I would play it every chance I got when I would go to his place, or he'd bring his Lynx games over. And to be fair, he's the reason I got a Lynx, because he got a Lynx, and so I got to play it firsthand. I got to try some of these games, and I was like, "This is badass." And I think I had tried a Game Boy game or two, and I like between the two, I was like, yeah, that one, the Lynx." Now, I do want to mention for anybody curious about the size of the Lynx. Imagine your Switch. If you have a Nintendo Switch, right?
Mhm.
Maybe for the first iteration of the Atari Lynx, extend it by about 3 or 4 inches. This was a very long system. It's about the
Yeah.
same height, and then make it about 3.5 times thicker.
Nice.
So this thing was absolutely massive, but the screen was still just a little bit bigger than a Game Boy screen. Even though the resolution was lower, the screen was a little bigger.
Yeah.
And so this this thing was not small. You were like, it's basically the Duke of handheld games. You know,
Yeah, it later got repurposed as Zach Morris's cell phone.
Well, I noticed that, like, you talk about the size, like, the screen, I think it said was 3.5 inches or
Oh,
something like that, compared to the Game Boy, which was like 2 point something inches.
it's
Yeah,
wider. That's
so
why.
How
Yeah.
did this thing ever lose?
okay,
Again,
so
it wasn't Nintendo, it was Atari. Look,
I don't
if
know.
Mountain Dew put out a mineral water, nobody would buy it because it's a Mountain Dew brand and they don't make water.
They
Yeah,
don't even
how well
contain
did
water.
Pepsi Life Water do, or Coke Life Water, whichever one in Japan? Is that still being made?
I
Couldn't
mean,
tell
they
you.
just make Nestle. What does Coke own? Nestle. I mean, they own
Nestle.
water brands, right? So
I think it was Pepsi that was doing Life Water or something. Anyway,
I know. I think one of the reasons
Yeah.
why this didn't do as well, honestly, even though it's superior hardware, it's got colors, it's backlit screen, all these great innovations for tech, especially from '89, 2 months after the Game Boy. But
yeah,
before this, you had the Famicom, you had the NES for multiple years pushing out hits. So that when you're a kid at Christmas and you see systems coming out, are you going to want an unknown, the Atari, that your parents are probably like, forget the Atari. I had that when I was younger. Or do you want the system that was made by Nintendo, which is what created the games you love at home already on the NES? So I
That's
think
what
it's
I'm saying.
software
right.
Yeah.
and Nintendo's brand, right?
Yeah, then you figure the Game Boy was usually packed in with Tetris and advertised
Yeah.
alongside Mario Land. So
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Mario was gonna be the brand that sold systems at the time for sure.
And had Metroid and had Zelda and
Yeah.
had, I mean,
Yes, but the Lynx had Batman Returns.
Which
Mm.
is
I've
terrible.
played that game. It's not
Horrible.
good.
It's
Yeah,
I
that
didn't
one's
think it was
horrible.
good as a kid.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
bad.
and if you're a kid who just loves video games, to stop and be like, "This sucks. I'm gonna go play
Yeah.
outside." We had this talk.
It's the Superman Ness of Lynx.
Yeah.
Right.
It's absolutely the Superman NES of Lynx.
But I mean, this
Well,
game was advertised. I want to talk about one of the commercials that you can find super easily online. So
yes,
there's
I
a
think I know this
commercial
one.
for this thing featuring a young Toby Maguire sneaking off to the bathroom during school to play the Lynx.
Yes, and the teacher's like, "You got 2 minutes." So he's like,
Yeah.
"Great, teach. That's all I need." And then I don't know if you found this funny, Wolf, because it sounds like you and I are the only ones who know this commercial. When he pulls it out of his jacket pocket, and
Yeah.
it looks like Mary Poppins pulling a lampstand out of her bag.
It's massive. It's hilarious. It's-
I mean, what
Wah.
teenager needs more than 2 minutes for Tetris?
Are you Marty
Yeah,
McFly?
exactly.
Nice. And if you go back and watch that commercial, or later on, guys, if you look this up, which I highly recommend, you'll notice that as he's looking down at his feet, because he's playing the video game, you'll see that the system is plugged in. So
Yes,
somewhere in that
and I
bathroom.
wanted to mention that.
Okay,
I
sorry,
wanted
I
to
don't want to
mention
steal
that
your
because
stuff.
It's
the battery life for this thing, they were like, no, the batteries are going to be too expensive for making this commercial. We're going to plug it in this
for the
shot in the
commercial.
bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah.
In an elementary school bathroom.
Right,
Yeah.
Tobey Maguire fake poops so he can play the Atari Lynx. And then some weird stuff happens, and Andrew Garfield shows up, right? I'm kidding.
And they do the pose where they like point at each other.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I was gonna say, you mentioned
But
the
yeah,
pack-in game with the Game Boy was Tetris. Do you know what the pack-in game was for the Lynx?
It was Chip's Challenge, wasn't it?
No, it was California Games.
It was California
Well,
Games.
Okay, now
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, actually, really quick, that brings up the point when I brought up, like, before this, like, we started talking, I brought up the Wikipedia article. The Lynx system was originally developed by Epix.
Yes. So they developed it as the handy game.
Mm-hmm.
The Handy.
And
Yeah.
Such a
and they
better
ran
name,
out
the
of
Handy.
they were running out of money, so they
What do
were
you want
looking
for
for someone to
Christmas?
partner up with. They
You
were
want a Handy?
rejected by the likes. What's it? Oh,
Speaking of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
didn't have Tetris. It had clacks though.
Santa gave me some socks, but my mom gave me okay, never mind.
A bunch of adult men were disappointed that Christmas. They requested a handy and got a Lynx.
Ugh.
But yeah,
Sorry,
they were looking for someone to partner with to develop not to develop the hardware, but to manufacture the hardware and distribute it. and they went to Nintendo, they went to Sega, they went to others, they were rejected. And so when they went to Atari, Atari was like, yeah. So they struck a deal with Atari where Atari manufactured and marketed it, and Epix handled the software. That's why so many of these games are made by Epix. There's
Yeah.
literally only 71 games for this, and
Mm.
probably half of them, give or take, are made by Epix.
Mm.
And that's nothing against the console, because the all these games are badass in some way or another. At least if Epix was touching them, yeah, it was a good game.
Okay, and you guys know I'm really bad when it comes to discussing technical things with video games. So forgive me if I get the number wrong here. Was it Mode 7? Is that what that's called?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
On the
On
SNES,
the
yeah.
Super Nintendo.
Right. So years before the SNES comes out, and I understand that the Lynx is not technically doing Mode 7, but it had some things that were very much like prototypical Mode 7 looking
Yeah.
movements
Flips,
and
rotating
changes, you
of
know?
anything, but more than Mode
Yes.
7 on the SNES. On the Lynx, it could do that effect with anything. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of the games regularly use the scaling and the rotation. I think it was Shadow of the Beast, which is a whole thing. But in that game, and in a lot of games on the Lynx, instead of having the 2-frame death explosion, it just scales the sprites down so they disappear. And it uses that effect a lot. And it looks really good on this. And that was my big takeaway when I checked this out this week, was how awesome that effect is on the Lynx. It's fast, it's snappy, and it used it everywhere. And it's really cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Look at that. Yeah. So California games.
Fantastic.
Yeah, this
It only had 4 of the 6 games. Is that correct? It didn't have a hacky sack or frisbee.
No, it didn't have frisbee.
did
It
have-
didn't have,
didn't
it
have
did have
roller
hacky
skating,
sack.
right?
yeah,
Roller
roller skating
skating.
and frisbee.
And they
It had
changed the
half pipe.
BMX.
It had half pipe, it had surfing, it had foot bag,
Yeah.
and BMX.
And BMX,
Yeah.
which they changed the BMX thing. And I personally, if I were developing the game, I would have said keep frisbee, get foot sack or whatever out of there. But frisbee is by far the best game on that entire.
That's fighting words for Sinistar. He really likes hacky sack.
Now, I
Footbag is
do like the frisbee
fantastic.
game, but I did like hacky sack as well, footbag. And BMX was one of my favorites, playing it on the Master System. So when I got to play it on this, I felt like this BMX version was a massive improvement over the 8-bit.
Yeah.
And the surfing was also really good on this. Not
Mhm.
really changed a lot, but there's a lot more degrees of movement, like
Right.
angle of movement you can use in the surfing. And it made it a lot more effective in my mind.
Like, you compare it to the NES version of California games, and I know it's lower resolution, but it looks better on the Lynx. Like, more colors, more like
Mhm.
particles, if that's even a thing, and like you said, more frames of animation. It's a lot more fluid. Like, it's
Sprite
really well
animation.
done. Yeah.
Like even just looking at the surf that's happening, it seems better animated. The hair flowing. Yes, you're going right to left instead of left to right. Who cares? But it just looks like a much crisper. I mean, I'm with you, Jake, on that one.
And the audio, I think, was superior to the Game Boy for sure.
Was
Maybe the hardware is, but there's so many bangers on the Game Boy though. Like, I really love Game Boy music, but it's definitely more limited technically. But I think maybe companies used it better than some of the Lynx games.
And
Like,
and
listening
there's so
to
many. Sorry.
I was just listening to Shadow of the Beast, which maybe not a great game, but Shadow of the Beast has a really epic soundtrack. It's kind of represented on the Lynx, but it's I feel like it was nowhere near what it could be.
I
And
will
so many
say,
of the Lynx games just have shitty or no soundtrack at all.
yeah, a lot of the Lynx games soundtracks, like if it has a good soundtrack, the loop is way too damn short to be satisfying. And if it doesn't, that's when the tracks get long and kind of obnoxious.
It's Ghostbusters.
So that's the downside for this thing. But yeah, like you see, there's tons of sprite scaling right there on the half pipe
Half-pipe.
mini game in California games.
And like, can you imagine seeing this? You don't see this on Nintendo. This is not on
Yeah.
Nintendo. This is not on Game Boy. This was not even close until Super Nintendo. But even the Super Nintendo couldn't do some of the zooming effects that they're doing on the Lynx. It's wild to see
Mhm.
this on a handheld from '89, which
From
is what
89,
mind
man.
blown. Like, even
Yeah.
Genesis didn't do this, right? Like,
And And I'll mention the Genesis again in a bit as a comparison for one of these games. But a lot of these games really never made it off of the Lynx, which is really unfortunate. If they weren't a port and they were original creations for the Lynx, they didn't make it off. I don't know if the version of Gauntlet on the Lynx ever made it to any other platform,
I don't
but it's
think so.
definitely
is
one
a-
of the more interesting versions of Gauntlet.
It is a cool port. I had to figure out what was going on at first when I tried it, but the minute you finally figure out what that bottom screen is about,
Yeah,
like,
it's
Yeah.
it's kind of showing you anything that's not, a static wall or floor. So if it's items or enemies or whatever, it's showing you kind of that first person dungeon
Yeah.
crawler view that your character would see straight ahead of them. And
Yeah, it's
it
pretty cool.
doesn't just limit you to like north, south, east, west. It's the direction your character is facing. So it's 8 directions. And you can see, like, if you're looking northeast, anything that wanders from the north or the east in that line of sight, you'll start seeing moving around toward you well before it's on screen, because it's
Yeah.
not a massive amount of screen real estate that you can see of the map.
And we
Which
got to
is
explain
nice.
too why this is so interesting too, is that it's not just, the elf and the wizard. No. It's the punk rocker,
Yeah, it's got the
the
punk
nerd,
rocker, the nerd,
Yeah.
the android,
the pirate.
the samurai. And I thought it was funny because I looked at the stats for the nerd, and they're literally worse than a bunch of other. Yeah, there's the cowboy, the Valkyrie. This is such a weird version of Gauntlet, where it's like semi-modern, semi-futuristic, Middle Earth. It's very bizarre.
I thought
And
the
this is-
Gauntlet port was fantastic.
Yeah. This is one of the ones I had the most fun with. And this is also one that was played vertically, like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
So it's the tape mode, which is interesting. It's a really neat game. I'm sad this didn't appear anywhere else. It's kind of shocking that this version of Gauntlet never saw the light of day on anything else. Like, his Gauntlet's been ported all over the place, right? But not this one.
I was
Well,
missing
so-
it saying something about, red wizard needs food badly. But
Yeah, this
What
is a
was-
game that I probably played the crap out of as a kid, because this is one of the ones I had. And I never got very far. I sucked at it, but I had a lot of fun playing it anyway.
Yeah.
And trying out the various different characters. I think there was something about the nerd that made him effective, even though all his stats suck. And I don't remember what it was, because I didn't try it this week. I only played as, I think, the android when I fired it up the other day. But I had a lot of fun playing this. I probably played a few games for about 45 minutes to an hour each. And then, yeah.
I think I laughed the hardest about there's a game called Dirty Larry, Renegade Cop. And it starts out beautifully. It actually has a really good looking. I played it on my CRT screen, because one of the things with like the Lynx is on my giant flat panel TV, it actually is hard to sometimes make out the characters because they're just blown out. So I pulled it up on my CRT, and it has this really cool, like, the police chief is yelling at Dirty Larry at the beginning, and it's great. It's yeah. I had a blast with that game. Dirty Larry, Renegade
So-
Cop.
I definitely thought it was funny. I didn't know how many games were officially released for this until this week. I didn't know it was only 71 games officially released for the Lynx.
That's more than I
And-
expected, actually. I thought it was like 30 or something, because I only ever see the same 12 on YouTube, right? I didn't realize it was 70.
When I was looking up to find which ones I had to share with you guys, I found that out. And I was like, holy crap, I had 23. I had like a third of these things.
That's a lot of
And
games
I had
for
no
a
idea.
console. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you looked into the collector's market at all?
They're not expensive. Most of the games are like 15, 20 bucks.
Oh, that's pretty
Okay.
good. Yeah.
This may actually be the first podcast episode of any podcast ever to discuss the Atari Lynx. Like, it's really not relevant, but man, it is cool. Which one
It
was?
was
I
a
always
cool
forget
system.
which one was their flight simulator, their Top Gun esque.
Oh,
Warbirds? Or
No,
Blue
there
Lightning.
was
the other one.
Warbirds, which was like a World War II
No,
flight sim shooter. It was more
No.
like dogfight style.
Right.
And that
With
one
the
was actually
biplanes.
like it did the 3D thing. But I think you might be talking about Blue Thunder,
Blue Thunder.
Yes.
Blue
Thank you.
Lightning,
Yeah.
Blue Lightning.
Okay. Yes, that
Um,
sounds
and
right.
that one
Blue
was more
something.
like Afterburner, where you were going
Yeah.
straight
hmm
and just
Yeah.
constantly shooting what came at you.
Yeah, and
Legit game. Legit game.
legit game,
Very.
and the stages wouldn't advance until you met certain criteria.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
ostensibly, you were just trying to do pacifist mode. You started that in '89, and you're still, playing it because things just never happen.
So I want to mention my dad was not a gamer. He was not at all. But he would in the evening after I'd go to bed, he'd come in my room and snatch the Lynx with Blue Lightning and go into the living room, and while he and my mom were watching TV, he'd play that thing for an hour or two, probably a couple nights a week for a couple of months.
Out of all the games, this is the one he liked the most.
Yes. I don't know
Okay.
why. He was an
Yeah.
odd duck because he also he used to love Wonder Boy for the Master System too. Like he would play the shit out of Wonder Boy.
The
It was
original
weird
arcade
things
one?
that would no, the
Or
Master
like
System one.
Okay, like the ones like Adventure Island, or the one where it's like
The
sword
one like
combat?
Adventure Island.
Yeah. Okay. A rough game.
So he loved that, and then
I just
when I got
shuddered.
this, he loved this. So I don't know. He was not a gamer, but those are the two games he got really addicted to for some reason.
Like when you compare Blue Lightning with or Blue Thunder, what is it called? Blue Thunder. When you
It's Blue
compare this
Lightning.
with Blue Lightning, when you compare this with Afterburner on the Genesis, I kind of like this one better. Like the Genesis Afterburner seems to have less frames of animation, and I always found it difficult to control. This I found easier to control
Right.
for whatever the reason.
Yeah.
It's odd.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting how much altitude you can get in this game, because
Right.
it lets you go up high enough to where you stop seeing the horizon. And then you can get really low to the point where if you're too low, you can crash into mountains.
Yeah.
So,
You can hit that deck.
I noticed
So
that I tried to plow into the earth and it stopped me, but then like mountains came up and I was able to plow into them. It was great.
yeah. So it's kind of cool that it has such a vertical play space that, a lot of games don't really go that much. Like sometimes you can move the horizon a couple of pixels and that's it.
What's
And
the
there
R-Type
was-
like game?
Well, hold on. There was another game that was very much like Blue Lightning, but instead of being aerial, it was underwater. It was called Turbo Sub.
Huh, I didn't
Very
know
I
that.
didn't see
similar
that one.
mechanics,
Huh.
but instead you're underwater shooting things and you can surface.
Hmm.
So very similar gameplay mechanics,
Wow.
but it was a submarine, just shooting across the sea.
That's awesome.
But the one you were talking about, the R-Type one, that is Gates of Zendikon.
Yeah. I noticed
Which-
that the maps on that, like, you have a lot of verticality once again.
Yeah, probably too much in that one's case,
Mhm.
because sometimes you can find yourself completely screwed by what's above you or below you if you're not diligent about,
Those fucking
keeping.
crystals.
You gotta like
Those-
go up and down constantly. Otherwise, it's like, all right, unless because every once in a while it'll lock you into a small vertical space, and then you only have so much room to go up and down, and then you don't have to move around so much because you'll just crash into the ceiling or the floor. But yeah, on some
Those
of them you
fucking
have to
crystals, man.
monitor.
Those fucking crystals.
What's the
Those
name of
things
that
show
one
up a
again?
couple of times throughout the game.
Gates of
Gates of
Zendikon.
Zendikon.
Yeah.
Zendikon.
That is the most Atari ass name I've ever heard of a game in my life. That's very much the American style of we need a wild name to name this game. Gates of Zendikon. It's like, were you LSD high today?
So, well,
Yar's
Zendikon
revenge.
Yeah.
is the name of the villain of the game. It's this giant space spider thing that's created numerous little like pocket universes and trapped your character in them. And you travel through these gates between them. So
Okay.
That
and
sounds
there's
awesome.
multiple gates in some of the stages. So you can actually like cycle, like go through a bunch of levels. And then if you take the wrong gate, it'll send you back to an earlier stage. So you're literally navigating a maze that you're not sure where to go because it's not like up, down, left, right. It's literally, do I take the first gate or do I take the second gate? In some cases, do I take the third gate? Is there a hidden gate?
Is
That
that
sounds a
the one
lot
that you were
less
telling
linear.
us
Yeah.
you discovered the developer room?
Yeah, so it's an Easter egg room that gives you all the power-ups and has you just shooting at the heads of the developers with their, either initials or names underneath their heads. And the level goes on for like 4 minutes. It's way too long. And it's not hard once you get all those little power-ups at the beginning. You could just sit there and just blast everything. You don't have to move. You don't have to let go of the shooting button. Just sit there and hold it, and everything dies. Eventually, the gate shows up, and you can move on. But it was funny that I used to play this game a lot. Never found that. And it was on a level that I do remember playing over and over because I remembered that password specifically to start on that level.
Hmm.
And so,
This is an
yeah,
Atari history because didn't the developer of Adventure put his initials into a room as well?
He did.
And it was
First
found
Easter
like
egg.
20 years later
first
or
one ever,
something
yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I mean, I looked it up, and this is a well-known spot. I just thought it was funny that I discovered it for the first time, just screwing around with the game
That's
after
awesome.
20 some odd years of not playing it, and just through the floor. And I was like, what? Okay, that worked. For some reason, I didn't explode touching the floor. Went through and just hung out underneath these tanks that were only shooting up, and then found a gate. I was like, what the hell is this?
Hmm.
But this was a game that actually almost got got a sequel for the Jaguar.
Oh.
Almost.
That makes sense because the Atari Jaguar, but that's just how funny is that? It's like what, 20 years between the two systems? No, not 20 years.
No,
There
it was like
Jaguar.
5-6 years.
Was it really? Jaguar's
Yeah.
that early?
Yeah,
Hold
like
on.
95.
How
Oh,
many
shit.
bits was that? Was that 64?
Not really, no.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'm
They'll
just
tell
thinking
you to do the
if
math, but yeah, it was 32-bit.
Yeah,
okay.
it's
Well,
a
I'm just thinking
32-bit.
if the Lynx came out looking this good in '89, then the Jaguar, for all I know, was
The
VR.
Jaguar cheated. It had two 68K processors, both 32-bit. So it called
Yeah.
themselves a 64-bit system. It wasn't.
Yeah, but I mean, by
93.
those standards, the Saturn is 96-bit, and I love the Saturn, but fuck that, it is not. But yeah, there were so many really cool and interesting games for this, and I'm sad they didn't get remakes. One game that I did have for the Lynx that did get a remake for it got a release for another platform, was Todd's Adventures in Slime World.
Another great
Now,
name for a
Odd.
game.
It's a terrible name, but obviously, like, it's like little teeny tiny text, Todd's Adventures in, and then giant font that, like, you could fit all of those other words in one of the letters, Slime World. So this was probably outside of Metroid, the first Metroid style game I really got into. And it's Metroid style in that it's a side-scrolling shooter platformer, and you're navigating a maze to try and find your way out. And you find power-ups, not the way you do in Metroid, where you find one major power-up and it opens up new areas, but instead you're finding little power-ups it's a more arcadey experience where you find, shields and things like that. It's all consumables. But the goal is to find your way out of this maze. And these mazes are freaking massive. I think it's got 6 levels. And then it also has a multiplayer mode that's up to 8 players.
Wow.
Yeah, because the Lynx had a cable port where you could connect up to 15 of them together. I don't know if there's any of the games supported 15 Lynxes, but that's wild.
Yeah, I don't think any of the games that came out. So it supported up to 16, but I don't think any games that were released actually supported that high.
Okay.
Just for the sake of keeping a game playable.
Hmm.
But yeah, up to 8 players. I think Slime World was the only one that went up to 8. Most went up to 4. But yeah, so Slime World eventually got and it was reviewed well on the Lynx. It was later ported to the Genesis, and so it made the multiplayer split screen. I don't know how many players. I'm guessing 2. But yeah, it apparently was not nearly as good as the Lynx version, which is kind of funny to me. Like, how does a game going from Lynx to Genesis get worse?
Well, that's what again. It's a testament to the power of the Lynx, right? Because
Yeah.
the other hardware you compare it to would be the Game Gear, Sega Game Gear, which came out even later. But my memories of the Game Gear is nothing but slow, glitchy gameplay. And when you put the side by side the Lynx, yes, the Lynx is lower res, but it's much faster and fluid than anything on the Game Gear. And like you
Yeah.
said, for some of the Genesis games, like Afterburner, it's maybe fast as a Lynx, but there's less frames of animation. Like it's wild how such a tiny device, well, tiny, a handheld device, how a handheld device holds up so well against other consoles at home. It's wild to me. This should have done better in the market. Like it
So
really should have.
It
that
really should have.
that made me think of another possibility for why the Lynx didn't do as well as the Game Boy. What was the price difference? I didn't look this up.
Oh, it was expensive
I think when the Lynx came out, it was 180,
back then.
and then it later had the price dropped to 100.
So
And what about the
reverse
Game Boy?
PlayStation 5 is what they did.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm not
Reverse
salty.
Oculus Quest, yeah.
Yeah, let's raise that price.
How did the price compare? Because I don't remember what the Game Boy was. Wasn't the Game Boy?
I think the
Like
Game Boy was
150?
100 at release, right?
Or was
I
it
think
100?
so. And then I think it dropped a little bit to 80, I want to say, at some point. But yeah, definitely not 180. Plus the
But,
cost of batteries by the crate.
Yeah, that
Right.
was an issue. Like it had the charger cable, right? Like the power block, and the cord was, I want to say, 3-4 feet. So
Oh, no.
most of my time playing the Lynx was not far from an outlet.
Little werewolves up against the wall.
Oh yeah, I would find.
I'm
this,
sorry,
like,
he's up against the wall doing a vertical game like this.
those I never played plugged into the wall because that cord got in the way. But definitely battery mode, I would play the vertical ones. Otherwise, horizontal for me. But it's interesting because I was talking about earlier how I think GP was talking about porting NES games to the Lynx. Yeah, what was that game you were talking about? Metal Storm.
Yeah,
Ninja Gaiden 3 got ported to the Lynx.
right.
It is bad. It's really bad.
Okay. I
I
didn't know
brought
that
up
was on
the
the
sound-
Lynx.
original.
The sound
Yeah,
effects, the music, the graphics, it all sucks.
Yeah.
I did get to the original Ninja Gaiden on the Lynx, and it very much turned Ninja Gaiden into like a Double Dragon
Yes.
like game.
That's
But
more like
that's-
what the arcade was, though.
That's what it was.
yeah,
It was
it's
an
the
arcade
arcade
port.
game.
Yes.
And it's a badass game. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's probably not as fast as the arcade game, but it's still fun.
It has the
And,
same kind of move set as the arcade and the feel as the arcade game. Like I like the NES version of Ninja Gaiden, but it's such a different game than the arcade, right? Completely, totally different feel. So I like
Yeah.
how they took the arcade. Another example of an Atari, a game that's in the arcades, ported to the Lynx of all devices, and they did it pretty well.
Yeah. And like this is a version that could have been ported to probably the Genesis at the time. Didn't happen for some reason.
Mhm.
But it went to handheld of all things.
Hmm.
And I had so much I remember when I was a kid, my friends and my cousins, they like Ninja Gaiden for the NES. That was their jam.
Yeah.
I played this before I played the NES one. And so once I played the NES one, I was like, why is everybody so excited about this game? The Lynx one's better. Which is probably one of the points, like one of the reasons why I'm always like salty about Ninja Gaiden for the NES.
It's
But,
wild that
yeah,
so Ninja Gaiden 3, the NES game, got ported to the Lynx.
Mhm.
Yes.
That's so weird, man. That's wild. Who
And
makes
the
Ninja
sprites
Gaiden?
are all like
It's
8
Temco?
Tecmo.
pixels tall.
Tecmo, yeah.
Yeah, and there's some issues with the coloring, if I remember, with Ninja Gaiden 3. So some of the backgrounds it was hard to distinguish exactly what was going on, given the technical limitations and the color palettes.
I think
mean,
it could handle and this is a technical spec, but it could handle up to 12 colors per scan line is how it worked.
Yeah.
And apparently sprite count was theoretically unlimited I'm sure there was a limit, but theoretically unlimited. I just don't think anybody got near enough to the limit for it to matter.
I mean, with so many pixels on screen, where's the room? At least it
Right.
had 3 ghosts on Pac-Man. That's all that matters.
How? Okay.
But
Bonk,
yeah, one of the
bonk,
games
bonk.
I
bonk.
lost a lot of time to was Chips Challenge.
I,
And it's
That
funny.
one's
I
so
tried that.
fun.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah,
good.
I loved this game. And then it was years before I learned it was actually a PC game. And
hmm
Wasn't
You
it
know,
originally on the Lynx, or was it originally a PC game?
that I don't
Yeah,
know.
I'll check my mind pals. Keep talking.
But yeah, I lost a lot of time to this game. And I think I was actually at one point trying to go through all the levels. And I think it had 150, 250 levels. It had a lot of levels. And I
It
know
was
I was
Amiga
like
first.
50 shy. That makes sense.
Yeah.
that's awesome. That is a great example of a game that doesn't need to be more than just what it is. Like it says a lot without using a lot of words, which
Mhm.
is not
This
something I do at all.
And it,
Chips Challenge is actually for the Lynx first. Then it came out to
Yeah.
Amiga and PC and
oh,
stuff
wow.
afterwards. It's a Lynx
Nice.
original. Yeah,
Huh.
according to my mind palace. Yeah, developed for the
Oh
Lynx
no,
first.
you're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
well,
Moby game sorted it badly for me.
Yeah.
well,
Sorry,
the
my mind palace.
designer of Chips Challenge, Chuck, I can't remember his last name.
Wepner.
He was one of the developers or one of the designers of the Lynx hardware.
Oh,
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. And that's a game. Chips Challenge is a game that definitely holds up even today as a puzzle type game. Like everybody
Mhm.
speaks fondly of Chips Challenge, whether they played on a Lynx or they played on DOS or Amiga, but it's a game that really holds up in people's memories.
Well, it got a sort of remake, what, 5, 6 years ago, something like that. Maybe it was a
Did
little
it?
longer. Yeah, it was called Chuck's Challenge, and it's on Steam.
Is it
Hmm.
really? Chuck's
hmm
Challenge. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a Lynx original. That's interesting.
Is Chuck's
Yeah.
Challenge a battle royale? Is that that's just the style
No,
now?
no, it's literally just a Chips Challenge clone, but in 3D, and the main character is like a little purple dragon guy or something.
Oh,
It's
that's a spin. Okay.
yeah, it's the same game, but without infringing the rights of the original game.
Okay.
Did
Looks
you
like
guys
that
have
one
any
was made by Epix.
questions or observations about this thing?
I would love to get my hands on an original just to, because we can talk about all of the size and everything like that, but without actually having it in my hand. I played this on my Mister, right? And so but yeah, I'd love to see the actual hardware.
The one thing that's
This
interesting is the screen itself. Because it's an early LCD screen, it's heavy on the scan lines, right? Like it's a CRT in your hands. So
Mhm.
yeah.
the graphics look crisp on the Mister. They look amazing on the Mister, but I would imagine on like a small little screen from the 80s, it probably did not look that fantastic. It was probably
No, this was
blurry. Yeah.
it was not that blurry because it was a little LCD screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Says it's LCD.
That's kind of my thing. Is I've been very clear about my next collection after the NES stuff will probably be just handhelds. It started off just as Game Boy, and then I think it's just going to be handhelds. And I really want to start with the Lynx because to watch the videos about it, to play the emulators, it's hard to think of something to hate on. But I think maybe once I'm holding it, where's my camera? Once I'm holding it, for anybody who's listening, audio only, go check out the YouTube chat. Okay, every week I do this nonsense, but I think owning one and holding it, then I'll maybe be able to get some better perspective vis-a-vis comparing it to the Game Boy, because really, if I were old enough to choose which one in 1989 I would rather own, I don't know that I would come down on the Nintendo side of things.
Right.
The Lynx was very big in 8-year-old me's hands, like massive.
Yeah.
Because I think even the Lynx II was bigger than a Game Gear or a
I was
Nomad.
gonna ask if you ever had a Lynx or Lynx 2 or tried a Lynx 2.
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had the Lynx 1, and I think the power cord on it got wonky. So when the Lynx 2 came out, since it was only $100, my parents made an agreement with me so that I could do extra chores and get the Lynx 2 to replace the Lynx 1 because I did have a bunch of games for it.
Right. So at least you got the
So
games. So yeah.
yeah, so I got the Lynx 2 as well, and then later got rid of the Lynx 1. I think my uncle took it off my hands for like $40 to repair it or something.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's I had both. The Lynx 2 was far more comfortable, and the screen I want to say was a little bit bigger and a little crisper than the Lynx 1.
It
And it
does
got
say
a
that it had better backlighting, better LCD panel backlighting.
Okay.
yeah, and it had it ended up getting a stereo headphone jack instead of a mono headphone jack.
I love how that was a feature of like the 80s stereo sound. How huge
Yeah.
that was at the time, right?
Well,
Take some
you didn't
things for
even get
granted.
you didn't even really get stereo if you were just playing it in handheld mode, unless you use the headphone jack on the Lynx
Right.
2, because there's just the one speaker that's under your right palm.
I can't hear my game anymore. I
Yeah,
can't hear
because
my
you're
game.
like, at least for me, because it's kind of awkward. You can either hold it like this and have your hand a little up,
Mhm.
or hold it like this and have your hand half hanging off the bottom,
Hmm.
and to get those bottom buttons.
You know what size comparison I'd like to see? I want to see the Lynx side by side with the Steam Deck. That's what I want to see. Because whenever I look at
Oh,
videos of the
interesting.
Steam Deck, that thing looks huge and unwieldy in a person's hands, and the controls are all
does.
cramped at the top. And I think it looks like a nightmare. Apparently, it's comfortable, but I think it looks terrible. But I want to see that compared to the Lynx side by side for size. Because I've held a Game Gear, and the Game Gear is kind of unwieldy,
Yeah.
but the Lynx is like longer, which is which is
Well,
interesting.
the Lynx 1 is really long. The Lynx 2 was dramatically shorter and
Okay.
had like rubber grips on the back, whereas the Lynx 1 just had like bulbous ends to it on either side on the back. So you're just sort of like holding on to bubbles in terms of the shape.
Bulbous End
And-
was Chard's high school name.
Oh God. And they're ribbed.
No, the Lynx 2 was ribbed.
Oh, really? For
Yes, that was the one that got little like rubber finger grippies on the back instead.
nice.
Now that's
for better
Tetris.
Tetris. For better
Yeah.
Tetris play.
Yeah, for your
For better
pleasure.
clacks.
So
For
from what I
better
understand, the Lynx 1, the games itself, there's no cartridge slot on the back. It was the handle. You popped open the door on the handle, and the game slid to the
Yes,
side.
It was
wasn't
under
the
the
Lynx 2.
D-pad side.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That's
it
pretty
was
interesting.
stupid because it was a big old flap. That was one of the things that went wrong with my Lynx 1 as well, is that flap broke off.
That was my high school nickname. Just big old flap.
So yeah, it was a big giant flap that you'd slide the game in underneath and then close it so that you could play. Whereas the Lynx 2, it popped in just like the Game Boy or Game Gear would.
Yeah, the Lynx 2 looks like somebody actually thought about handheld design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, even the cartridges went through like 2 redesigns.
I heard about that. Yeah.
The original cartridges came out and they were just flat. They were little game cards.
Mm-hmm.
But with the way it stuck into the side of the console in the Lynx 1, it was a bitch to get out of it. You were just relying on friction and pressing it in while you were trying to pull it out. So they later got a redesign where they put like 2 little hinges on it, like 2 little I don't know what you'd call them.
Tabs or
Yeah,
bumps.
tabs, 2 little
Yeah.
tabs. And then you could grab it by the tabs and pull those out. And then they later redesigned it again to where it just got like a lip on the end of it.
Yeah, it's got a curve. So not just ribbed, but also curved for your
And
clacks.
lipped.
And
And
lipped
lipped.
for your clacks. Yeah.
All it needed was the rumble feature, and it's just,
I mean, this was
dominating.
originally called the Handy. Just let's never forget that this was originally going to be the Epic's Handy.
Yeah, the Epic's Handy, not the Atari Lynx.
Right.
Right.
Still would have had the X in there, but
Just missing 2 more.
God. And I think I mentioned this in a Marco Polo earlier this week. Every time I hear Wulff's little robot voice at the outro of every episode, I will always think of the Lynx now, because so many of the voices, the voice acting from these video games sound just like Wulff's impression. Is that where you kind of got that voice from, Wulff? Can I
No.
ask you that?
No.
No? Okay, because the first time I heard that, I'm like, okay, well, there it is. It's got to be it. But
I
apparently
think
not.
you got it from Ghostbusters, the original game.
Was there any voice in
Yeah.
any of the games for the Lynx? I don't think so.
Yeah,
Was there?
yeah, there was absolutely.
Really?
Yeah,
That system is amazing.
I'm
I think
sorry, I don't have it
I
available in front of me.
I don't
But didn't
remember
did
games having like any major dialogue chunks,
no, but
but
there were little
APB did
phrases.
have voices.
Yeah.
Like
Didn't
you'd try
Dirty
to pull
Larry?
over a guy who hadn't done anything wrong, and you'd hear "Make me." And
Yeah.
Because
No, no,
like
no.
the Game
Okay,
Boy
I'll
didn't
have
have
to.
voice at all, right? So the Game Boy never had that.
No.
I don't
Yeah.
think.
But I'm
right?
pretty
Yeah.
sure didn't Dirty Larry have
It might have.
vocals?
It might
Yeah.
have.
I've
I'll
never
have to
played
find some
Dirty Larry,
examples.
so that one I'm not sure about.
Oh man. But yeah, I'll
You haven't lived until you played Dirty Larry
on a
That's
handy.
right.
on a
On a
handy.
handy.
Ayo.
Sorry, YouTube.
I'm
Yeah.
not.
Not anymore. We're proud, YouTube. I'm just looking at on eBay for the Lynx. That is not a cheap system to get nowadays on the eBay.
How much is the hardware?
Really?
It's like
'Cause
$250
the games
plus.
Wow, because the
It-
games are like $15-20.
It's got to be
I'm sure
because
they're
the
a
games
lot more
themselves are
if you go
just
for them.
cartridges or cards, and then maybe there's like a surplus of them. Maybe the hardware is hard because it's a early LCD, and maybe it's like what do you call it,
Well,
capacitors and
I
stuff
have to
breaking and things.
I have to
Yeah, maybe.
imagine so much burn in on those screens too.
Yeah, I know. I saw one YouTube
Early-
video, but they one guy was recommending you can do a screen mod on it, replace it with
Yeah.
a modern LCD to make it a little bit clearer. But I mean, that's probably, I guess, if you have a lot of burn in or it's dulled over the years, then maybe. But I think part of the
Right.
appeal of the system is to see those scan lines on this device, because
Absolutely.
that's an early handheld and LCD screen. It's like when I play Game Boy games on the Mister, it's one of the only cores where I turn on the grid scan lines to kind of mimic what the Game Boy looked like. Because for me, the Game Boy and handhelds was all about that pixel grid up in your face. So it's hard for me to play it without that. So I imagine the same thing with the Lynx.
Stun Runner has voice acting.
Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
The woman's voice repeatedly giving you updates and telling you what you're doing and things like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, I'll try
I'm-
to put together a list for you. Maybe we can update it in Discord, which everybody listening, if you're not on our Discord, please join us because we have some crazy ass discussions.
Yeah,
PressBTocancel.com.
I do wonder if any of you guys got to check out Electrocop, like I said.
Yes.
I didn't.
That has 3D. That one has
It-
3D.
Okay.
That makes
Uh,
excessive use of sprite scaling.
yeah.
But it's
Uh-huh.
impossible to line up your shots and everything, right? With the
It gets tricky. It does.
Uh,
yeah,
But,
I've
and it has
watched video on that one. Yeah,
the minute that I went through a door, like, like in a 3D, I was like, wow, this was like a handheld in '89. Wow.
Yeah.
This looks
and
amazing. Holy crap.
I think Electrocop was a launch title.
wow.
Can you imagine like comparing this to Nintendo? Because that's the console you had. Maybe the Genesis. Like the Genesis didn't have this at all. Like at all. Nowhere
Yeah.
close.
And that was just one of the things. And it's funny because it's got mini games in it too. And if you run up to a computer and you could play a mini game instead of the main game. Like it lets you play Breakout or I think Snake was one of them, and there's one other. But it's funny because if you win one of them, it's like you won, big deal. Because that's not the
Good
mission.
job.
The mission is to like save the president's honor. Yeah, this letter game that
Yeah.
you're
You
seeing on
should
the screen
feel-
here on YouTube.
You should feel proud.
Here it is.
Yeah. it's
Okay.
like, you won, big deal.
This is
This
where
great.
a portion of my brain has been since we started. The Atari Lynx is almost like around the time 8-track came out, somebody proposed a CD player, but still somehow 8-track became the more popular thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, I would say it's more like VHS and beta.
yeah.
If Game Boy is VHS and the Lynx is beta.
Was
It's
Betamax
true.
really that much better than
Yes,
VHS?
it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Betamax actually had surround audio in it.
Okay.
Way ahead of its
It
time.
was massively improved over VHS, but
It had surround sound.
But the
So
porn
does my
industry,
7-year-old once he's had coffee.
but the porn industry made the decision for us all.
VR. Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Pop-up ads.
I've revealed too much.
RetroCop is just it makes so much use of the scaling sprites, it's ridiculous. Where you
does.
see like enemies and the walls in the distant background just sort of shrink and get further away or zoom and get
It
closer up.
seems
And there's a couple
gimmicky
of
though.
spots where you can see like
But it's
a
no
little
different than
bit,
Pilot
but
Wings.
it's a
Pilot Wings
cool
was gimmicky
idea.
too with its Mode 7 floor, right? Like this is taking
Sure.
the same
Yeah.
tech thing, but this is amazing because it's what it is it's multiple sprites that they can choose to scale to mimic a 3D environment. This is wild because this is not something you would see on Super Nintendo. Couldn't do it. Definitely not the Genesis. No hope in hell of the Game Gear doing this. We wouldn't see something like this until maybe like the Jaguar. Like this is amazing tech for such a small device. Like that's really impressive.
Okay, that's where the discussion shifts. What is the point of having impressive tech if it's not playable, if it sucks?
Uh-oh. I think we lost
Uh-oh.
GP.
Oh no, GP.
Oh no.
He's
gonna make his
he's
point.
Not being playable. He
But
froze.
to his point though, like, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games. I know the Super Nintendo had a lot of this where they would use the Mode 7 and it was more of a gimmick and it didn't really maybe help gameplay too much. Like Pilot Wings is one of the few games I think that did Mode 7 in a way that made sense. F-Zero is another one where it's like, this is cool. But yeah, there's games that have used Mode 7 just cause, and they were just kind of disappointing. I know some games on Super Nintendo used to use Mode 7 for the intro, and that was it. It would just fly in the title screen, and then that was your Mode 7 use for the game. Like that was the use of the chip. That's the
I think
waste.
Soul Blazer did that just for its title.
Yeah, which is okay. But yeah, I still stand by it. Like there's other games on the system, like we said, California Games with the half pipe, the zooming in, which is necessary, really, to get that to work, is pretty awesome. For those watching YouTube, sorry, but GP logged out, so the screen's gonna look a little messed up until it hops back on.
Jake just went a little Picasso on you. Sorry.
Oops.
But
yeah, this is pretty awesome.
A lot of the majority of the games on the Lynx are definitely worth playing. A couple of them seem more like tech demos than worthy games to play, and a couple of them just plain suck. But the majority of them are definitely worth your time. Fire this up on an emulator, or if you've got an Evercade, 2 cartridges were released for that with Lynx games.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do they run as well though as this? Oh, I guess they would have, because Evercade's pretty decent hardware.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Okay.
The first title, like there's 2 collections. I think the first one had 17 games, the second one has 8. So there's a lot of games missing, a lot of really good games missing from those collections. But find yourself a way to play the Lynx. Maybe not on a 60-inch screen.
No.
Just so that you can more easily make out what's happening.
Right.
But it's definitely worth a play. This is still one of my favorite handhelds of all time.
Yeah, and like when you play there's GP. Hey GP, welcome back.
Sorry, everybody.
No worries.
No worries.
You were just making your point and became unplayable.
Yes.
Yes. Let me go back and just say how none of my points matter anymore. I have typically a good internet connection, but if something becomes unplayable, what's the point?
So you're the whose line is it anyway of press B to cancel?
Look,
Your points don't matter?
what we need to take away from this is the extents that I will go to take a bathroom break in the middle of a show. So just in case the internet craps out again, please continue, and I will be here observing.
Oh, you listened to that, or you read that book that talked about how to hang up on people, but do it midstream because nobody would hang up on themselves, and then that way you get out of conversations. You took that to heart.
Son, I wrote that book. Okay, please, continue. Sorry.
I don't know. The only thing I really didn't like about the Lynx as a child was the sheer size and weight of it and the battery life. The amount of batteries it took and the amount of the short lifespan it had. I mean, it always felt like they only lasted 2 or 3 hours. I'm sure they did last the 4 to 6 hours depending on the version. but when you're a kid, you have all the time in the world. It feels like a game flies by in no time.
Right.
Yeah.
And
But at the same time, though,
otherwise you're
compared to
pinned
the
up against a wall.
right.
Yeah.
But you compare this to the Game Gear. The Game Gear had 3-hour battery life, I think, with its 6 AA
Something like
batteries.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and
So
it
the
took
Lynx was
6,
better
yeah.
than the Game Gear. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
or like was it the Nomad? Was the Genesis version of the handheld, and that was even worse, I think. So Lynx, honestly, not bad. I'm really impressed with this hardware. I am shocked it had 70 game library. I did not realize how big it was. I'm wondering now if half of them were sports games, and that's why I didn't know. But that's still
No,
pretty
there's not a
sizable.
lot of sports games for it.
Really?
I
Okay.
saw a hockey game
There's
and
a
of course California games.
California Games,
and
the
then there's
pack-in
a
title,
tennis
yeah.
game, but most of them are very arcade games. Like I had Robotron 2084, Rygar, podcast favorite,
That's right.
I
Rygar.
did try that
Yes.
one. Yeah.
And it's an arcade port, so it's the arcade version
Yeah.
on the Lynx, which is interesting.
So
Yeah.
it got a lot of arcade games, and they were really good renditions of them. So, like I said, find yourself a way to play some Lynx games and just submerge yourself in it. If you find one you don't like, just move on down the line. Try another one. I swear
Start
you'll
with
find something you love.
start
Get-
at the
get-
bottom with Batman Returns.
It's all
Get-
uphill from there.
Get yourself an emulator on your computer, get a ruler, measure out 3.5 inches of your screen. cut the window down to that size, and then you get the full effect.
And find something that is both rubber and ribbed, and you've got your experience right there. I don't know where you'll find that, but
These days, Microsoft charges a premium for the rubber grips. Totally different market now. How much for the
I
ribs,
will say
Microsoft?
it was-
How much for the ribs?
I will say it was a much more comfortable gaming experience playing on my 8-bit dough than it was, playing up against a wall on an 8-pound handheld. But
yeah, but your delts are swole, man. You got those adult male shoulders that I never got.
8-pound handheld was my high school nickname. Sorry, that
this
one was
horse
Don't
is
be sorry, that
sufficiently
was perfect.
beaten.
yeah, that one was just served up a little too easily. No, Werewolf, this has been great. I know you were the one that brought this up, and I had not given the Lynx the time that it deserves.
Yeah.
And it deserves some time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say of all of the episodes I've been a part of that have required me to do some research, this is definitely one of the more fun experiences. Not that I've ever had a bad experience doing the research, but I thought about the Lynx pretty just consistently over the past week and a half.
Yeah, it's one of the most shocking. Like we talked before about hidden gems for games, but this to me is like a hidden gem of a console because
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
knew
I
of the
don't-
Lynx. I wanted one, but it is so much better than I thought it was. Like usually when I look about stuff I wanted as a kid, it was trash. Like the Game Gear, I think is not that great of a system.
I agree.
But the
Yeah,
Lynx,
it's a lower
holds up.
resolution, less powerful master system.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's what it is. Like I imagine, like, what if Sonic was on this thing? Sure, he might be a little pixelated, but he would run so much faster than the Game
Mhm.
Gear version.
Well,
Like it's wild.
that's the thing is, we do think of these handheld systems of just kind of being like a smaller, slightly worse version of the current console that's out, but at least it, you can take it with you. This is just heads and shoulders above everything. I was blown away that I absolutely. Yeah. Anyway.
So this came out around the same time as the Atari 7800, I think. And if I'm not wrong, this looks better than some of the games that are on the 7800, which is also wild to me. So that's something. 7800, I think, only had a handful of games as well. So this had a more bigger of a library than the home console.
Yeah, and GP,
Insane.
the most expensive part of your collection, if you start collecting the Lynx, will be the Lynx itself.
Yeah, that's interesting. Considering like it's still kind of a slept-on system. Of course, they're not making them anymore. So
Yeah,
And,
it
I
didn't even
would just-
sell 3 million units, I don't think.
Yeah.
I would assume that you're also going to be, if you're going to collect this, I would assume that you're likely going to need to do some fixing on it. I assume at least probably capacitors.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. It's that era.
And definitely keep an eye. If you do collect, for anybody, honestly, if you go looking to find yourself a Lynx, make sure, do your homework on the capacitors. Make sure all the covers are intact, because I think battery covers on both my Lynxes died back in the first couple years of me having them, and the cartridge cover on the Lynx 1 also broke off at one point. And it's not like I was rough on my consoles. They just,
Right.
because I was not. I wasn't. It was a handheld. I wasn't gonna throw it around. Thing was fucking fragile, right?
Young men and clacks. I mean, sometimes things break. What can you say? It's
I
okay.
would assume there's a market for 3D printing for those things.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was fun. This was a nice trip down
Yes.
memory lane for me. Everybody else had Game Boys and Game Gears or whatever have you, and I had a Lynx, and I loved the shit out of it.
Yeah, I've never been upset that I had a Game Gear until learning about the Lynx.
Yeah. I had a Game Boy. I'm not going to say I was disappointed, but I would have loved to have had both of these.
Yeah.
Well, okay, sorry, not to keep the episode going, but at the top of the show, we were talking about how, this came out around the time the Game Boy did, but it wasn't Nintendo, it was Atari, yada, yada, yada. It still feels weird, even after the past hour, 15 minutes, to say that it should have toppled Nintendo's Game Boy. Fuck the Game Gear. Like that I don't mind saying it could beat that. But still, like, there's this odd reverence for the Game Boy, isn't there? Like, even now.
Well,
Yeah,
there's so
well,
much great stuff on the Nintendo Game Boy. Like there's hundreds of titles in the Game Boy and so many great games. Even though it's limited graphic wise, the
Right.
gameplay was solid.
But that's what I'm
But
saying.
again, the
Like,
Lynx has solid games too. Just we
yeah.
never played them, right?
But I'm sitting here ready to be like, no, this is so much better than the Game Gear. But then you bring up the Game Boy, and I'm like, well, hold on, though. I mean, let's
Yeah.
not get crazy.
Closer than one would think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah,
hardware
very cool.
alone, if hardware were the only factor and everything else were equal, the Lynx should have won. But obviously,
Well,
that's not the case.
It should have been game over at the discussion about just being backlit. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
2 months
100%.
after the Game Boy, it's backlit and it's in color.
And it's in color. Take that, Nintendo.
Right.
It's like, oh, we'll just ship 500 games over the next year. Beat
Dude,
that.
no
Nintendo.
backlight.
You guys didn't like mounting up the light system to your Game Boy?
Yeah, the 17 accessories so that you can see the screen bigger and light it and get more battery life out of it.
And
And
then print off a couple of words.
Was there the Game Gear had a TV tuner? I guess there's nothing like that
Yeah.
for the Lynx, right? Probably not.
I don't think so. The only accessory I can think of for the Lynx was like a little sun visor. You could buy a little awning for the Lynx 1 so that you could play it in daylight and see the screen.
They should have done they should have totally thrown shade at the Game Boy and been like, well, they'll sell you a light so you can see the screen. We'll sell you some sunglasses so that our screen doesn't burn out your retinas. Just to throw some shade at Game Boy. That's what I would.
Well, in their advertisements, they worded it weird, but it was like this handheld will eat the boys' lunch or I don't know. It said something like that. Eat the boys' lunch, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" It was really weird worded advertisement. And
It'll go
it was
into the
basically-
elementary school bathroom and take your lunch money.
Oh God.
It's very weird.
Down handheld.
The Atari did not do a great job at marketing this thing.
No.
If everybody knew my uncle, everybody would have had a Lynx, but they had to deal with magazine ads and Tobey Maguire TV spots, so didn't sell that well, unfortunately. Tobey Maguire wasn't Spider-Man yet.
Well, if your uncle's still around, I would say you've done him proud, and he needs to listen to the episode so that he can have his day.
He is not.
Exactly.
He passed away many years ago.
Well, he had good taste and a
He
wonderful
did.
nephew.
Agreed.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me on this conversation.
This is fun. This is a great topic. Good job.
Yeah.
Again, try the Lynx, people. Don't let this sleep on you any further. All right. Where can the people find you guys? Jake.
You can find me sometime on Twitch. I swear I will again someday, someday. But I'm on Twitter, and I'm also on YouTube. Just search for Sick Jake on YouTube. I'm putting slowly some videos out. I'm actually building. Oh, it's over there. Another arcade stick. I'm gonna put that together. It's American style buttons, so I'll probably do something in video form with that. And I also want to say on behalf of Chard, because he's not here this week, but he has another channel called Retro's Most Haunted, and he would like to get that to affiliate status. So if you're listening to this episode, either on audio or if you're watching it again on YouTube, please go find on Twitch Retro's Most Haunted and give him a follow because he needs 75 follows before he can get that affiliate status. And it's mostly
Did it
just
go
to
up to
get
75 now?
yeah, it's 75 followers, and it's mostly just his transcoding options and make it a better viewing experience. For people watching it, so I like to see him get
Yeah.
to affiliate.
All right. Sinistar, how about yourself?
I'm also on Twitch, Sinistar77. I have been still working on my Sisyphean game, Super Mario Brothers 1. I had a PB. I made it
PB
to
hype.
5-4.
Absolutely.
And there's a great clip of me having the first experience of 5-4. You should go check it out.
Right on. GP, anything going on?
No, mostly just hanging out here with you bros. I am starting up the Retro Therapies YouTube page and slowly starting to put, drum videos and old speed runs and various content videos from back in the day on there. So if anybody missed those, you can go check those out. Otherwise, as I'm always saying, at some point I will go back on and do a few Chivo hunts or the Mega Man damage randomizer for charity fundraising stuff
Right on.
in time.
And I am Werewolf, WAREWULFF. Search it on Google, tell it you meant it, you'll find me. I have been doing some homework videos, but I haven't put them up yet. I'm really slacking on that. We've got the TikTok. I've been putting a few videos up there. And I started playing Stray with the kiddo the other day for his YouTube channel once we get that going. So that was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Fester's Quest. You got to finish Fester's Quest.
Oh,
I do. I still have half the game left. I haven't touched it since that day. I'll get to it. I swear.
All right.
And then I'll play the second one, and it'll be a fucking breeze. Not the second, but the European version.
There you go.
yeah.
All right. This has been Press B to Cancel, talking about Lynx. Thank you all for hanging out with us.